I'd like to go to our first question, but a little background. Electricity can come from a variety of sources: coal, natural gas, solar, wind, nuclear, hydroelectric, biomass, energy storage, and others. Today, New Jersey gets 40% of its electricity from nuclear, more than 50% from natural gas, and less than 3% from renewables. Moving to 100% renewable will require a major transition from our current sources of energy. And I want to start with you, Mr. Rawlings, first. Our question is, in what sequence do you think we should proceed to replace non-renewable sources of energy? And what will be the role of using energy more efficiently?
Okay, thank you. Well, as you know, there was some background to that question with some figures about fossil, nuclear, and renewable energy, but I think those numbers and those figures need to be brought up to date to where we are today. So today, in the coming year, the way it's defined by law, the percentage of renewable electricity in New Jersey will be about 17%. And I think we should talk about where we are. Now, if you look at that 17% for the coming year and said how much energy, how much renewable energy are we actually generating within the New Jersey borders in the next year, that'll be about 6.5%. That's pretty good compared to other states, but it's obviously nowhere near where we need to be. An interesting thing is that solar energy that we have right in the ground today is capable of generating just under 4% of the electric power in the state. And that's on an annual basis, but during the middle of a sunny day, it was cloudy today, but take yesterday when it was, where I was at least, it was very sunny. In the middle of the day from 11 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, about 19 or 20% of the power in the state was coming from solar. That's remarkable. And it's not just remarkable from, where we're going from a climate change point of view, but when you're generating 19 or 20% of the power in the state in the middle of the day, that's the period when electricity is usually the most expensive. But that contribution of solar is depressing the cost of power on the wholesale grid. So we're already seeing these cost benefits from solar. So it's jobs created in the state, it's depressing the cost of power in the middle of the day, and there's local, besides climate change, there's local environmental benefits. Electric production produces a lot of fine particulates that get in people's lungs. Lung disease is the third biggest killer. It's reducing SOx and NOx. So all these benefits have to be taken in consideration with the cost. So when you ask the question, what sequence should we use? That's a real debate right now, because that cost issue that I mentioned before is leading some people to say, let's take the cheap route and let's buy credits for Midwest wind power. So we just send our dollars to Illinois or West Virginia and say, we've made wind power happen.
Okay,
well, first of all,
can we move on and let's see what we can discuss. Ms. Garand, can you, what sequence do you think we should proceed to replace?
In fact, I can even finish your sentence,
Okay,
yeah.
if I may. And yes, and what Lyle was trying to say, actually, yes, instead of why don't we install clean energy in this, in our, as our own assets. And so Mid-Atlantic region is really interested in now generating wind, and in addition to solar, definitely I cannot choose neither wind and solar. They should go hand in hand, and solar is much easier, actually. It started, but also wind wind should really be coming along, and our own solar, offshore wind activities. However, also I'd like to draw your attention. Currently, also again, I'm just talking about only organic waste, but storage is really important. While we are, investing in solar and wind, we have to also make sure that we are getting and storing that energy for when the energy generation is not available during the day. So that is really important for both solar and wind's efficiency. And also, again, I'd like to draw attention. Currently, landfills are generating landfill gas, and the EPA says that the landfill gas generation, collection efficiency is 80%, but not all the landfills do have that efficiency. Plus 80%, what does it mean? 20% of the gas is just leaking out into the atmosphere. But when you collect that energy, certain landfills cannot even use the installed power generation units. They're flaring because of the regulations, which is important. You cannot just release landfill gas into the atmosphere. You have to oxidize it. You have to flare it. But that is like a lost opportunity. While we're doing this, and landfills are so great things, but it is a yesterday's technology. Why don't we transform ourselves for tomorrow in a better approaches? So that's why I am promoting, instead of just why don't we transform them for tomorrow's better approaches, that sustainable bioenergy should follow wind and solar together, and then really state should utilize its own resources, because neither composting itself, large-scale composting, we had in the state 4 projects already failed, large industrial scale composting, because even if it's aerobic, the anaerobic digestion happens, and then you're releasing methanes into the atmosphere. So why don't we just install large state-of-the-art digesters where the farms are, where the landfills that they can locate, because they have the waste infrastructure.
We're going to have to.
Obviously, but
Okay.
you don't want to have small, so we have to have industrial
It's difficult, I know.
utility scale thing.
Okay.
Finish my sentence.
Yeah, but you use a lot of semicolons. Mr. Walsh, do you have considered what sequence you would propose?
So the first thing we need to do is stop building fossil fuel infrastructure. We need to stop supporting dirty energy, like putting $300 million to subsidize the profitable nuclear industry. Hopefully the governor will veto that bill. I don't have a lot of hope for that, but hopefully. We need to, right now in the state, we've been replacing coal with gas and building pipelines to do that. I'd like to say that, we're concerned about the build out of biogas that's being talked about. We don't consider it renewable energy, and we're concerned that it actually will incentivize the creation of more waste while forcing ratepayers to pay the bill for these unsustainable industries. We do think that the biogas issue needs to be addressed, but not in the same way that Dr. Garan thinks. We do think that planning and the priorities, which do we do first? To really answer that question, you need to do extensive modeling. You need to really look at this. It's a complicated issue. Now, we just did that in Los Angeles, and we looked at what it would take to transition Los Angeles to 100% renewable energy by 2030. And what we found is Los Angeles' current trajectory is to be about 55% renewable by 2030. And Los Angeles can build the same amount of renewable energy they're planning to build under a 2030 scenario to reach 55%, and they can reach 100%. And they can do that by focusing on energy efficiency, demand response, and storage without actually increasing the amount of renewable energy that they're actually talking about delivering. And what's even more exciting is that they can do it for about $2 billion less than the cost of continued reliance on fossil fuels. And that's using strictly solar, wind, and geothermal energy sources. And so I think, Dan broached the subject initially of energy efficiency, looking at energy efficiency, demand response, response and storage are going to be key to actually reaching 100% renewable energy. And it was really telling in this report that they could do it with they could reach the same really energy generation and for the whole city by focusing on using the grid smarter, using their energy smarter, and we need to do that.
Well, thank you. Mr. Lawton, what are your thoughts on sequencing?
I can be pretty brief because I don't really have the expertise other panelists have in this area. I'll make 2 points, though, because part of the question was the role of energy efficiency. Just quickly, I'll just say that I think focusing on improving energy efficiency, reducing our demand for energy should be an ongoing priority because that's where the leverage is. Because part of the question is, what sequence? Another way of framing it is that our energy system is a very complex system. So one of the questions is, where are the areas of leverage to drive large-scale systemic change? So energy efficiency will always be one of those leverage points we need to focus on. The second area, Dan mentioned this a little bit, is back to what I mentioned before in terms of the single bottom line way of doing business. What that means is to maximize profits. One way you do that is to offload or externalize costs to others, to other stakeholders, to the environment, to communities. And Dan mentioned the environmental justice communities, low-income communities. In our system right now, there's a strong correlation between economic power and political power, which means that these low-income communities, environmental justice communities, have disproportionately borne the brunt of all the problems from all the pollutants from the fossil fuels. So I would just say that quickly that in terms of sequence or priorities or areas of leverage, I think we need to focus on those vulnerable communities, whatever we do, whatever the sources are, and make sure that we at least somehow compensate for the negative impacts they've experienced, and represents a huge opportunity for us to really focus and invest in resources to create a renewable energy infrastructure in those communities so they share in the benefits of the renewable energy transformation.
Thank you. Mr. Fatton, can you pull that together?
I can try. So I guess 2 or 3 things. One, I should say that even though members of our coalition support going to 100% clean energy, technically our coalition is pushing for 80% clean energy by 2050. It's a pretty big distinction between what we're talking about. It's getting us on a path towards 100%, but there are concerns from some of the labor unions who are members of our coalition that their jobs will be displaced if we have 100% clean energy. And we can debate the validity of those concerns, but right now we decided it was better to come to a consensus position to bring labor to the table and to agree on all the other things that we agree upon. One of which is we want 50% clean energy by 2030, which is what's in the bill. And I think I fall in between where Lyle and Jim are on the energy bills that passed last week. We submitted a lot of comments about our concerns with those bills, none of which were really made, but the 50% goal is actually, like Lyle said, really important, and it's an aggressive target for this in this country in this moment. In terms of prioritization, energy efficiency I think is number one. We want to see even more aggressive energy efficiency targets, which was one of our comments on the clean energy bill. Number two, I think, is ramping up solar, and so we have to do the solar fix and make it more affordable for the state, but I think we can do much more solar in this state than we currently are doing. And then offshore wind, the development of offshore wind is a major priority, but it's going to take time, and there's going to be a process at the BPU in order to move forward with offshore wind generation in New Jersey. And I think I'm different than the other panelists as well on nuclear. So I don't think that we can shut down nuclear power plants, I'm sorry. I don't think that they should get an unrealized subsidy without proving that they need it. But if we shut down nuclear now, we're going to get natural gas. So we have to allow those nuclear power plants to operate through the end of their licensing period. If we really want to shift towards renewables, that allows the space for renewables to ramp up to really replace nuclear rather than just getting more natural gas, which I think is the first thing that has to go.
So we have to think about these roadmaps. Okay.
And if you don't mind, I'll break in about that natural gas. It's important that we realize something about natural gas. The accounting for the greenhouse gas footprint of natural gas is woefully inadequate because we always talk about CO2. Actually, most of the greenhouse gas footprint from natural gas comes from methane emissions. And methane is 86 times more powerful than CO2 as a greenhouse gas footprint. And so if you include that, natural gas is actually worse than coal. So we
That's
do
helpful.
need, as was said before, we do need to prevent the construction of new fossil fuel plants, and especially especially natural gas, because that's where it's all going, because it's cheap.